Hey Geeks, I don't know if you heard this, but apparently President Biden may not be the one in charge of the federal government.
And I don't know who's running the federal government these days, Joe Biden or Prince John Prince John, but they're...
This guy? Okay, I don't normally do this. I don't know who this Prince John is from Prince John, but if you know him, you call me. We're gonna find him. My team and I here at Oh My World, we're gonna hunt him down. Yes, the news is as ridiculous as you'd expect. Before we start, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. Things in Ukraine are getting much worse, and the US government said it expects the Russian government to become even more aggressive over the next few weeks. Putin has faced an unexpected level of resistance from the Ukrainians, whose strength has just been amazing. But because Putin has been unable to force the Ukrainian government to collapse, his response has shifted to pursuing indiscriminate violence against innocent civilians. So the Russian military is bombarding Ukraine in civilian areas, like against apartment buildings, hospitals, and businesses, and literally inflicting terror on people. This week, the Russian military bombed a children's hospital and maternity ward in the eastern city of Mariupol. And they're not going to stop there. There are reports that the Russian military may consider using chemical weapons and that they're recruiting Syrian fighters to come fight with them. Some cities are encircled and will run out of food and water in a matter of days. The number of refugees fleeing Ukraine continues to rapidly grow. In fact, over 2 million people fled over the course of 12 days in what is the largest movement of displaced people in Europe since World War II. And Russia had said last week it would agree to a ceasefire to allow civilians to safely leave, but unsurprisingly, they never meant it. In fact, at the latest round of Russia-Ukraine talks, the Russian foreign minister looked at the world and lied when he said that Russia never attacked Ukraine, and he denied an attack on the hospital in Mariupol. Meanwhile, people inside Russia continue to protest this war, and so far 13,000 Russians have been arrested for that. Even Russian moms of soldiers have come out against the Russian government for sending their boys to war. And let me tell you, don't mess with moms. The Ukrainian president has asked for a no-fly zone, which is when other countries help protect the airspace so that the land under that area remains safe for civilians. And he's also asked for fighter jets and for anti-missile defense systems, which is basically technology and weaponry that allows you to shoot at a missile that's coming at you. Poland offered to send fighter jets to Ukraine, but they're worried about getting sucked into the conflict, so they wanted to send the planes to a US airbase in Germany so that NATO could deliver them instead. The US rejected the plan though, because they're worried that if the Russian military strikes the pilot delivering the plane, then that could be interpreted as an attack on a NATO member, therefore roping NATO into this war. Since this debate is getting utterly ridiculous and we're now looking weak, I nominate a team of badass Ukrainian pilots to just go to Germany and take the airplanes. A message to the US and European governments repeatedly publicly saying how we're afraid to upset Russia may not be the best communications tactic. Like, okay, we get it. You know who else gets it? The Putinator. He's listening. He heard ya loud and clear. I don't know how this ends. I can just say from experience that the Russian playbook usually gets uglier. And if there's anything I learned handling the first 2 years of the Syria crisis, my advice is to do whatever is needed to put an end to this as quickly as possible. Because the more time passes, the more criminal Putin will behave, the more complicated things become. And the things that you said you would never consider, like sending a warplane, you end up considering. But by then it's too late. So let's stop being scared, since we're already helping the Ukrainian military, and help them more, and maybe go against tradition and consider giving Putin something to make him step back. That's not going to be a popular view, but I know that if we don't do everything to get this to stop immediately, this will no longer be a war about Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It will become about Russian government terrorism against innocent civilians, and it will turn into a moral and humanitarian disaster. My message to the US, European, and NATO governments is to learn the lessons from Syria and not let it happen again. I've gotten a lot of comments about how many of you love our Ukraine correspondent, Misha Zelinsky, who's still in Ukraine reporting for the Australian Financial Review. He's in the western part of Ukraine right now in Lviv, and he shared with us how Ukrainians are feeling.
G'day guys, I'm coming to you from central Lviv, directly under the King Danilo Monument. Lviv is beautiful today, it's sun's out, people are out trying to live their lives despite the evils happening in the east of the country. Yesterday, I was on the Polish border with 200 refugees fleeing across the country. Now, right now in Ukraine, there's a humanitarian disaster unfolding. Already 2 million Ukrainians have fled the country. 1 million of those are kids. And so it's extraordinarily difficult right now for people trying to get east into the west of the country and across the border. In Mariupol, southeast of the country, the city is surrounded. They've had no food, water, electricity or heating for at least 10 days. 200,000 people trying to get out. So if you can do anything, it's make sure that you're giving to refugees, making sure that you're helping local charities and putting pressure on governments to make sure that the Russians honour their commitments to allow for green corridors and the exit of refugees into the west of the country and into safety. Stay safe, guys. Talk to you soon.
Follow Misha on Twitter and Instagram for more of his amazing articles. And Misha, please stay safe. U.S. officials traveled to Venezuela over the weekend to meet with the Venezuelan regime to talk about energy security and the safety of U.S. citizens who are detained there. We don't know how long this meeting had been planned for, but the timing during the war in Ukraine and just 2 days before the U.S. announced oil sanctions on Russia isn't a good look. Now, it's normal to pursue diplomacy, especially when you have American citizens detained abroad. And clearly the U.S. got something out of it, since 2 Americans were released right after those talks. We still have 8 other U.S. nationals jailed in Venezuela, including the 2 guys who were arrested in 2020 after they tried to invade by boat to overthrow Nicolas Maduro. I still can't believe they tried to do that. Nicolas Maduro, whom we and 60 other countries have said is not the legitimate president of Venezuela, welcomed the U.S. delegation, after which he said he would talk to Venezuela's opposition. I'm not going to hold my breath, though, since he has brutally repressed and impoverished his people. But a guy like that doesn't give anything for free. So what's he getting in return? His hope, of course, is to start selling his oil again to the U.S. and to take advantage of the high prices right now. And we don't know what the U.S. is doing on this yet, but I do think it's important to poll people to see how they would feel if we did in fact start importing Venezuelan oil again. We sanctioned this oil in 2018 because it was fueling Maduro's regime and he's a murderous human rights abusing thug. So I asked you all what you thought, and 85% of you said it was wrong to pursue this kind of deal. Here's the situation. Russia is the world's 3rd largest producer of oil. 8% of our energy imports are from Russia, so that's a small amount and something we can replace. But this isn't just about US consumption. Europe has also pledged to cut its Russian energy imports by 2/3 by the end of the year. And that's a lot, since 40% of Europe's energy imports come from Russia. So the administration is looking for ways to replace Russian oil in the market by increasing production so that prices don't skyrocket. And that's why you might hear that Venezuela might get more of its oil out there, or that the administration is begging Saudi Arabia to increase production as well, for example. If this isn't a commercial for clean and renewable energy, I don't know what is. But at a time when we're arguing that the world has to be united against a war criminal, it doesn't exactly seem like it's a good time to warm up to another tyrant. We already know that if the Venezuelan regime can sell its oil again, its leader will use that money to fill his own coffers, illegally stay in office, and abuse his own citizens. So I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but I'm telling you that if we pursue this, we'll have to address the bad consequences from it years from now. Florida's governor is expected to sign a bill that forbids instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So what that means is that teachers or other administrators at school can't really talk about these issues in these grades or face possible lawsuits from parents. There are a lot of problems with this bill. One of them being that the language is vague enough where a parent could sue for any kind of discussion on sexual orientation and gender identity. And that threat means that teachers from other grades might avoid these critical conversations altogether. But the thing that irks me the most about this bill is that no matter how you slice it, it's really just a cold-hearted attack on the LGBTQ community. Because what these legislators who drafted and passed this bill are saying is that we don't want people talking about the LGBTQ community, and we don't want them teaching our kids or exposing them to the truth. And so by pursuing this deliberate effort to silence schools, or even just learning or talking about sexual orientation and gender identity, they're actively hurting other children, and they're communicating that those children shouldn't exist. I criticize other countries around the world to crack down on LGBTQ rights, and so I'm not going to dish it on other countries when stuff like this is happening here in 2022. We at Oh My World support the thousands of kids in Florida who have bravely spoken out against this bill, and we join them in saying that we say gay. Meanwhile, Florida's governors and the legislators who supported this bill are on my list this week. Did you hear that? That was the noise of women around the world this week on International Women's Day, screaming for their rights even when their own governments suppressed them for doing it. In Istanbul, Turkey, women marched even though the governor tried to ban them. 38 women were detained just for protesting against the high level of femicide in the country. And instead of praising these women, Turkish riot police fired pepper spray at them. That's what I call insecure men. Women in Pakistan also braved threats of violence to march for their rights. In fact, every year the organizers of the Women's Day March in Pakistan face death threats and people have thrown stones at the protesters. A Pakistani government official tried to quash this march by renaming International Women's Day as Hijab Day, another insecure man. Around the world, in Indonesia, Kenya, Sudan, the Ivory Coast, Iran, Mexico, and across Europe, women protested for their rights against violence, and many voiced solidarity with the badass women in Ukraine who are fighting in the front lines and doing really hard shit. These women are why we make any advances in women's rights, and we are grateful for their bravery. Thanks for watching, Geeks. Just want to end with an important PSA, since apparently giant spiders are expected to drop from the sky across the East Coast this spring. It's no big deal. It's fine. Just get an umbrella. Ugh. Before you go, make sure to like this video, click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Of course, if there's anything you want me to talk about, reach out to me on social media and I will definitely give you a shout out. Stay fabulous, geeks.